Hello and welcome to Future Review. Today I'll be sharing with you part 2 of my Prelude to Foundation book review. And just to clarify, all my book reviews that I do will be composed of two parts. The first part will be a plot summary and the second part will be a brief overview and commentary of various topics I find interesting upon reading the books. Uh, Many of the topics covered in these commentary videos will receive their own dedicated videos because they're very deep and interesting topics that deserve to have a video focused on them. But in these commentary videos, I just want to draw attention to them and give you my brief thoughts on them. So that's what I'll be doing here as well for Prelude to Foundation. And like all book reviews, spoiler alert, if this is a problem, this is your last chance to leave the video. You have been warned. And now that that's out of the way, let's get into the video. Of course, since this is the Foundation series, the first thing I'm going to start with is obviously psychohistory, Asimov's signature concept. Psychohistory certainly will receive its own video in the future, but for now I'm just gonna give it an overview and summarize its potential implications that I saw. Uh, as I explained in the first part, psychohistory is the branch of mathematics that deals with modeling and predicting human society. And the reason that I say human society is because psychohistory only works for large groups of people, billions of people and above, so societies essentially. Psychohistory is useless for predicting individual behavior. It does not work. It does not provide anywhere near an accurate prediction. And so the main thing with that I saw was that leads to an interesting debate with psychohistory. If psychohistory is to become a reality, if it's even possible at all. If such a science existed that could predict society fairly accurately, but cannot predict the actions of individuals acting in their own individual ways, do people in that society have free will if psychohistorians are out there predicting the future of society? Does the individual still have agency? Are they still living their own life, or are they just well, swimming in the same stream towards a predetermined outcome? Is there really free will here? And that's an interesting question. And I'm going to leave it at psychohistory at that, so that you can think about yourself until the actual psychohistory video gets made. And the second topic I'd like to cover is Trantor itself, because Trantor is a city planet, often called a cumenopolis in our sci-fi vocabulary. Asimov didn't invent the term ecumenopolis, but as far as I'm aware, he did invent the city planet in Trantor. And Trantor struck me because this was my first exposure to the concept of an entire planet encased in city. And a city planet, like what Asimov described, is pretty much what you'd expect a planet-sized city to be, which is our current cities, but every characteristic of them multiplied by 1,000,000. And that includes things like the culture, the wealth, the power, but it also includes vulnerabilities. Notably, Asimov goes into some detail about the vulnerability to siege that a city planet like that would have, especially a city capital would have. Because in our own time, we know that cities are very vulnerable to siege because they can't grow their own food. There's no farmland in a city. They're not self-sufficient. They rely on food imports from the countryside. And that's the case for a city planet, except substitute rural imports to off-world imports. That's very much the case with Trantor in Prelude to Foundation. Trantor supposedly depends on food imports from 20 different agricultural worlds nearby. And Asimov also describes Trantor as the Empire's delicate jugular vein, which really goes to show just how vulnerable and also how centralized the Empire is. That if you decapitate the capital world by cutting off its food, you collapse. The Galactic Empire completely collapses. It can't survive the shock of having its capital taken over and cut off from food and starved. And so I think that's interesting because in our future, it leads to an interesting question of, is this type of world actually a good idea? Is it really a good idea to have an entire world just completely dependent on food supplies that may or may not be coming because it's space? Who knows what can happen? Who knows what can interrupt food supplies? Even a small food interruption in food supplies on a world like Trantor could easily lead to millions, if not billions, of deaths. Is it really a good idea? Maybe when we're colonizing the galaxy in the future, it would make more sense to have each world be relatively self-sufficient, so that each world is deliberately not completely urbanized, so that there is always at least some ability to grow food on that world, to hopefully make the human empire a little more resilient to shocks, and so it doesn't just fall apart the second interstellar trade goes away for some reason. And another thing I found interesting about Trantor is that it kind of shows how dated Foundation is in some way, because Asimov describes Trantor as having a population of, I think, 45 billion people, which sounds like a lot to us, but it actually isn't. It turns out if you can, as long as you can feed the population, obviously, you can actually fit and house and run an economy on a planet of much more than 45 billion people. You can fit at least an order of magnitude, maybe two or three above that on just one planet. And it doesn't need to be a massive planet, just Earth. So I think that's interesting that you don't actually that Asimov actually very much lowballed the number of people that a sprawling ecumenopolis could actually have. In the 1950s, I'm sure 45 billion was massive, but it's a very, very strong understatement of what a planet can actually hold. And Humanopolis definitely will receive its own video in the future, so be looking out for that because it's a common trope in sci-fi vocabulary. So I will be doing that later, but for now I'll leave you with that, with what I got from Trantor first reading Prelude to Foundation. And the third thing I'd like to talk to you about that struck me perhaps the most when I was reading Prelude to Foundation is Earth, Earth itself. Because in Asimov's universe, at the time of Prelude to Foundation, Earth, the homeworld of humanity, is all but forgotten by the vast majority of the population of the millions of worlds in the galaxy. And I was thinking, is that really possible? Is that our fate? That our descendants won't remember us at all, pretty much? Even in Asimov's universe, Earth is almost considered, it's a myth to most people. It's not even just a legend, it's an outright myth. It doesn't even exist to most people. It's just the biologists claiming that humanity had to evolve on one planet. So, and I was wondering, is that what's going to happen? How likely is it that Earth will actually be forgotten in the future if humanity becomes a spacefaring empire? And well, the argument for the argument I thought the argument there's some arguments for and against this. The argument against this is that surely we won't forget our home world, the world we developed the most on, the world that would have thousands of years of head start on any other world. And so that means that theoretically Earth should remain a center of human civilization because Earth would still be developing at any point that a space colony would be developing at the same time. Earth would have that head start, and so in theory, Earth should remain the center of human civilization. And if that's the case, Earth should remain inhabited and thus not forgotten. But the argument against this is is that really the case? Does Earth have to remain the center of human civilization and thus remain at the forefront of people's minds? The answer is not really. It doesn't have to be like that. Because other worlds might be better than Earth in some way. They might be richer. They might be in a strategic location. They might just be so beautiful that everyone wants to go there instead of Earth. For any of these reasons, different centers of human civilization in space might come up and sideline Earth. And potentially even like in Asimov's universe, as it turns out, make Earth uninhabited. Humanity completely just migrates away from Earth. They don't care anymore. It's gone. And if that's the case, then maybe Earth will be forgotten because it just won't be used anymore. And combined with the fact that think about this. Historians know perhaps 1% of history, if they're lucky. We really don't know that much about our history because so many records have been lost. How much do we know about Sumeria and Egypt these days? Not actually that much. We know some broad strokes, but there is far more that we don't know than what we actually do. And that was only about 6,000 years ago or so. That's just a couple millennia. In Asimov's universe, for instance, that's tens of thousands of years in the future or something like that. And you have to wonder the fact that the historical records can get lost, they can get corrupted or they can get misplaced or something like that. Basically, our record of history, it goes away faster than you think. And if we don't know that much about our ancestors, then how much will our descendants actually know about us? Just because the sands of time erode the historical records for whatever reason. And I actually think that's the most compelling argument out of all these. Just the fact that so much time has passed that we just can't record everything, and it gets lost at some point. Sure, we have video footage and photography, and that might help, but those things can be destroyed or just worn down to the point that our descendants may not be able to actually use them to figure out what we were like. And so that I thought that was interesting, if a little depressing, that we may be completely unknown to our descendants far in the future if they ever end up in space. And on that depressing note, that's all I have for you for the Prelude to Foundation commentary. If you enjoyed that and thought it was interesting, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And until the next video, goodbye for now.